I love this virtual masterclass, and I'm super excited that Manola Jack said, yes, I would love to be interviewed, and I would love to take time out of my busy schedule, which I know she really does have, and share with us on how to hire a change enthusiast. And the reason that I asked Manola if we could interview her on this topic is if you look at her LinkedIn profile, her job title, the first one she selected to put there is actually change enthusiast. I mean, I don't know who else has that title. But I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to her before we start. Manola, I mean, she shares this about herself, but I completely resonate with everything that she says. She is fascinated by people. She is passionately curious about what makes them tick. She is a journalist by trade, which you'll see because Ross will share the link to her weekly change management articles that she writes really professionally. And she's a change manager by choice. And she stumbled across this about 20 years ago through a series of fortunate circumstances. And she says she's been enjoying that ever since. So Manola, one of the things that you said is, I said, you know, it's testimony to Manola's love for change. The fact that I met her when she was in Luxembourg and now she's in Switzerland. And Manola, how many times did you say you've moved?
So over the past 20 years, 14 countries.
14 countries. That is a true. And she's still smiling. So we're assuming she's enthusiastic about that. But she's definitely been in so many business transformation projects with a key people focus. And you can hear over 14 countries, just by virtue of the fact that she's moved across geographies, cultures, people, industries, sectors. She believes in positive disruption. So when I said to you that she would appreciate little comments in the chat box that are disruptive, we still would like them positive, please. But she loves that. She loves anything that kind of springs up that she can speak to. And she is a relentless advocate for storytelling, coaching, walking, cooking, more walking, sky and people watching. I mean, you'll see all of these things from the photos that she shares as well. And something that I know she says she's a travel, books, coffee and ice cream addict, but something that we've promised we will share when she comes to South Africa one day is peanut butter on toast with honey and banana. And so just before this webinar, I had that for lunch with sunflower seeds as well in celebration of chatting to Manola today. So Manola, there's so much more that we can share about you. So please do go to Manola's LinkedIn profile and you'll actually see all the changes that she's made. But maybe one of the things you can share with us for when we go to your LinkedIn profile and we see Change Enthusiast, what made you pick that title?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so very much, Jane, for the invite. And, you know, good, whatever moment of your day you're enjoying on your time zones, and so grateful and humbled by you taking the time and the curiosity to join us today. How I ended up putting Change Enthusiast first on LinkedIn is actually a change journey for me. I do know that some recruiters say that, you know, you should have a real job title so that the algorithms pick you up easier. But at the same time, I am on a journey that challenged what I was taught about work. And that is that, you know, a lot of sense of pride and a lot of sense of identity comes from our work. But what we do is not who we are. And what I am is a change enthusiast. And I will be enthusiastic about change regardless of what role it happens that I have at any given moment in time. And that was the underlying agenda of having Change Enthusiast is also this message that, you know, who we are is not just what we do.
I love that, Manola. Such a great point. And I think not everyone has figured that out for themselves yet. a lot of people would feel very lost if they removed their job title from their introduction. So I love that. And it's so true. I think as recruiters and in the recruitment industry, we also recognize that whether people intend to or not, they bring their passion into their work. And it's wonderful that you've been able to align your enthusiasm with the type of work that you do. So tell us a little bit more about what is a change enthusiast? What does that look like? How would you define it, calling yourself one?
Well, there are several ways in which I can go about answering this question. Linking it to, is it a change enthusiast or an enthusiastic change manager? One of the things that I believe the pandemic made even more clear is that change itself has changed. Yeah. So we used to have change management as an add-on to a project. Yeah. And that pretty much created this expectation that, change management is a bulk of work with its own identity, and you go about it with a methodology and tools, and it happens. My personal view is that change is now the reality, and we manage change through projects. Hence, I would not necessarily look for change managers as much as I would look for change enthusiasts. And change enthusiasts are people who are comfortable with change, people who are extremely curious, people who stay intentionally curious, and they gather more and more dots, and they are curious about new and new ways to connect the dots. I keep saying that if we look at different things, we will end up looking at things differently. And that's something that I think change enthusiasts have in common. But there are some points that I believe are important to make. I would not necessarily say that change enthusiasts are, the usual suspects, like the extroverts. Or people who go for change also as a way of life. There are people who are change enthusiasts, overall. There are people, for example, that look for balance. So they might have very, grounded, very stable pockets of their life or career, and go completely, adrenaline junkie, change driven in others. So I would go into hiring a change enthusiast with a very open mind and with a very open heart. And, I would not necessarily even look for the word change in a CV, or, for the word change to come up in a conversation. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is, when people ask me, what does success look like for a change manager? Because that is what I do at the moment. I serve as a change and org effectiveness lead. Success, like real full success for a change manager, is when we become obsolete, because the change capabilities and the change mindset and the enthusiasm for change is already embedded in people and in processes and in companies and in the culture.
Okay. So Manola, I love how you've said, okay, you don't kind of look for a cookie cutter of, this is what a change enthusiast looks like, but you have mentioned certain qualities that you've seen in yourself and that you've seen in successful change managers who are also change enthusiasts.
Yeah.
So have you ever had to recruit other change enthusiasts yourself for your team or to work with, or?
Yeah.
You have? So tell us about what you liked and what you didn't like. Like why you hired someone or why you didn't hire someone. Tell us what you looked for.
Okay, so I will be, I hope I won't be too enthusiastic about changing the conversation a little bit
Go for it.
at this moment in time, because before going out and looking for a change enthusiast, I believe we should also look within and understand what change is it that we are, trying to address. What change is it that we have the appetite to accommodate? Yeah. And what is it that we need that change enthusiast for?
Great question.
So that's something that, before how to hire a change enthusiast, what change do we want to accommodate, and can we accommodate, and to what pace? So therefore, how much enthusiasm do we need? Yeah, because I can give you an example, a personal example. I was told that, oh, we hired you because you are different. And then through all the performance management reviews, the feedback that I got was, now we want you to be different like us. And therefore, in full honesty, I got very enthusiastic about changing my job. So before you look for something, what do you need that person for? And what are you offering that type of change enthusiast? Now, like I said, I don't look at job titles. I had the incredible chance to work with change enthusiasts who were executive assistants. I had the chance to work with incredible change enthusiasts who were, very senior executive, and everything and anything in between. Yeah, I was on a project in Malta, and actually a change enthusiast was the driver. And why?
Nice.
Yeah, and why? Because he was genuinely curious, and he had so many opportunities to strike conversations with the people that he drove around. And curiosity for me is the cornerstone of any change enthusiast. Yeah. Keeping an open mind, being comfortable with questions, coming up with new questions as soon as they get answers. I think that is a trait for a change enthusiast. That comes with compassion and self-compassion at the same time. Because sometimes, you don't know what you don't know, and you need to look at that, suspend judgment. All change enthusiasts are storytellers. But the point I want to make here, let's not confuse performance of delivery with storytelling as a sense-making ability. Yeah. So not all change enthusiasts, are will build this story, and the story will be an experience. But the stories that I am after are, can they build a plot? Yeah. Can the characters be different points of view or opinions that they had to, weigh in their mind at any moment in time? The conflict building can be the decision-making process. So storytelling as a sense-making ability, that is something that all change enthusiasts have in common. Not necessarily, like I said, the extroverts. There are some amazing change enthusiasts which are introverts. It's just, how they process information, how they go for additional insights. Oftentimes, introverts are just amazing people processing change in a different way. What else about change enthusiasts? Also, I wouldn't necessarily equate change enthusiasts with people making a lot of changes. Yeah. Sometimes change is expanding the place that you are in. So I wouldn't say that someone, who I don't know, changed 14 countries in 20 years or changed 7 jobs in 10 years is a change enthusiast. One about what I didn't like. The things that I didn't like when looking for change enthusiasts was not about change enthusiasts, but about the constraints I came into the conversation with when offering them a role. Yeah. Myself, and this comes out of many conversations that I've had with people passionate about change, is they don't necessarily talk about the job and the task as much as they talk about their span of impact. Yeah. There were 2 questions that I asked in all the recruitment processes that I went through, and those were my deal breakers. One was, what is expected of this role and what is needed from the person filling it? So, they change enthusiasts, they speak more in terms of outcomes than outputs. I think that's something that recruiters can pick up in conversations. And the second one, and this is one of my favorite questions ever, is what is important for me to know that I haven't asked? And, that speaks to curiosity, that speaks, to keeping an open mind. And that also speaks to change enthusiasts being comfortable that they don't know what they don't know.
So you're saying those are the 2 questions that you've always asked people that are kind of deal breakers if you're wanting to hire a change enthusiast?
Those were questions that I asked my future potential employers.
Okay, from the applicant side.
From the applicant side,
not the hiring side.
These questions come up in various ways of wording, but you can spot a change enthusiast about how they, based on how they go about their role. Yeah, are they interested in tasks, in something that's very transactional, or are they more about, what is the impact of this role? And what are the levers that I can pull? Who does this role report into? What are the key stakeholders? What are typical processes within which, this role has something to contribute with? What have been some of the previous experiences with this role in the past? Also, I wouldn't rule out people coming from traditionally more conservative pockets of an organization as no potential for being change enthusiasts, like compliance. Because being change oriented is a mindset, and how they go about compliance, that can also have change built in itself, and how do they perceive compliance? What do they use compliance, to regulate? Processes, outcomes, conversations, across the organization. So again, go for a change enthusiast with an open mind.
I love that. And that it's about, because I think our new world of work is really influencing, and it's really emphasizing that skills need to be transferable, and people need to look for transferable skills and not just look for, you did this, so that means you can do that, but really see what skills will help you to thrive in this new role. So I love that, Lola. And tell us a little bit about being a change enthusiast yourself. And I love seeing your open mind as you're talking about it. And you've said that you've also been on the side, not just where you're hiring people, but where you're applying for different roles. What are the environments or cultures that have excited you the most as a change enthusiast? Because often recruiters have to sell a role to a candidate, especially if it's somebody with a scarce skill. It's not just, it's very much that two-way street. So part of finding out what's important to the client is also finding out how the client would sell that role to somebody who'd be perfect for that role. So what are the things that have excited you the most or would excite you the most about a role?
It's not necessarily a one clear-cut answer. As myself, went along my own change journey, of course, I picked up on different signals. It so happened that at one point I was working mainly within the startup environment. Yeah. And my change enthusiasm got triggered by the startup environment. Mm-hmm. Then doing some CSR work, I got immersed in the NGO environment, and that sparked my own, a different expression of my change enthusiasm. And then having a moment, I was in my early 30s, having a moment of, I don't know what I don't know. I discovered, that I didn't have any corporate experience. And I got intentional about, discovering the corporate world. And I can't tell you rationally what triggered my curiosity. But for example, I resonate with job adverts or job profiles or, job packaging that tell a story, that have an intent, that isn't, they're not just inventory of tasks and they're not just inventory of skills, but they tell a story. So yeah, not bounded by industry, not bounded by environment. What might, for example, be particularly interesting is if there's any whiff of cross-functional work. Yeah. So anything that puts a change enthusiast in the middle of exchanging ideas, in the middle of testing, in the middle of, experimenting, in the middle of talking with different people at the same time. So I think cross-functional, and with everything around agile and innovation accelerated by the pandemic, I think that that's not a difficult story to come up with, and that will be the new reality moving forward. Anything that speaks about creativity and freedom, everything that speaks about contribution and not transaction, and everything that speaks about it's a role that you can grow into, and then you can expand the boundaries.
Oh, I love that, Manola. And I think, everything about advertising and roles and communicating company culture and attracting top talent is really becoming more and more about storytelling. And I can see how, as you're saying, the change enthusiast is naturally a storyteller. And as you say, more in terms of the sense making than just as a tool. But we know that it's crucial. We know, you mentioned the pandemic. I mean, it's, you know, everybody has had to change, whether they want to change or not. So I want to, before I open it up to everyone to ask questions, I want to acknowledge that some of us in this virtual room and some of us who will listen to the recording afterwards might feel like, oh, I'm a change enthusiast. I love change. I thrive. Give me change. And some of us might be sitting here thinking, I'm not so enthusiastic about change. I know we all have to change, and in order to thrive, I have to change, but I can't call myself a change enthusiast yet. So what practical advice or tips can you share for people who aren't that in change enthusiast yet, but would like to grow in that area? Where can you start? What can you do?
I would start with something that is fundamental to a change enthusiast, and that's self-awareness and self-compassion. And what I have come to learn is that, you know, change and change work is a very fluid dance of innovation and stability. And this change enthusiasm, again, I never equate it to change. It might be, but not necessarily. There are, you know, the spectrum of change enthusiasm is very wide. And you have, you know, this absolute, you know, change addict in whatever way, shape, and form they can get change in their lives and in their profession. But at the same time, there is a different way of looking at change. And there's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's called The Leopard, and it speaks about the Sicilian aristocracy after the Italian Risorgimento, after the Italian revolution. And basically, the key takeaway from that book is that in order for things to stay the same, we need to change. And I used that in a workshop with a private banking client, you know, the epitome of stability. And it was a whole conversation around, what do we need to preserve? What is important to us? Who are we that we need to preserve? Is it the market share? Then okay, you know, there's a natural attrition of the traditional client for private banking. So in order for us to keep the market share, we need to be intentional about going after people who do their private banking via mobile apps. Yeah, and meeting them where they are, not necessarily, you know, in cigar bars. Yeah, and that is okay. And that whole self-awareness and that whole self-compassion exercise is about what is most important to you, the preservation of which needs to be based on change.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Manola. So there's a self-awareness, a self-compassion, and then really thinking about, you know, change doesn't mean everything changes. It's also thinking about what needs to be preserved. Yeah. But in order for something to be preserved, something else might have to change.
Yeah.
So I love that, change in order to preserve.
Yeah, and also, you know, because we do talk about how to hire a change enthusiast, and you asked me, you know, one thing that I didn't like. I wouldn't necessarily be so strong in saying that I didn't like, but I will say that one of the strongest change averse cases I got from change managers. And I will tell you what I mean. There is this reflex to rely on methodologies. Yeah. And change enthusiasts, you know, they tend to be framework, methodology, and tools agnostic, because they know that there's just a way of packaging things. And when I had conversations with change managers who happen to be certified in one change method or another, and they saw that particular methodology as the only way to properly manage change, I'm like, okay, but what does that say about your own change mindset?
Right.
So one of the things that really gives me a physical reaction is when I am in a conversation about change, and within the first 3 to 5 minutes, the question, what tools will you use or what methodology will you use? I'm like, no.
Right.
Imagine you go to a doctor's and you say, I'm coughing, and the doctor just gives you a prescription. Now, without asking anything else, how confident and comfortable would you be with taking the syrup, the pills, or whatever it is, without understanding the family medical history? Have you been coughing for 2 days, 2 hours, or 2 years? Are you smoking? And depending on the organization's appetite for change, depending on people's personal preferences for change, methodologies give you a structure, but let's not confuse that structure with a mental checklist that helps you go through change. I think that's very important.
And that reminds me of what you were saying from the start around curiosity and asking questions, and that asking questions generates new questions.
Yeah.
I see Liz echoing your thoughts there in the chat box, saying, don't frustrate people with turbo sub-menus until they can finally talk to a person. So that's also very frustrating for a change enthusiast.
Yeah.
So Paola, maybe what we can do, is there anything you want to share before I stop the recordings that we can, get to hear more of people's questions and views in conversation? Is there anything you kind of want to end with and leave us with?
Well, first and foremost, really wholehearted thank you. Please feel free to reach out. Always happy to talk about change and any other topics, really. And just think about how and what do you need to do for yourselves and the people and the organizations around you to enable conversations where change as a word itself is not disruptive. I think this is the first thing that we need to address, and we need to understand that change is the reality. It's no more like, when is this change gonna end, or why are we changing this? We just changed it. So change is the reality. We manage it by projects. It's no longer change management attached to projects. That is the biggest change that I feel. And just stay intentionally curious. And also what I forgot to mention, but I think it's a key point, is that change enthusiasts are incredibly good listeners. And they listen to understand. They don't listen to reply. If they listen to reply, it means they have a methodology that they want to implement.
Yeah, so true. They're kind of listening within that paradigm. They want to stay within it and keep the conversation there. Oh, I love that, Manola. And I know that all of us have really enjoyed listening to you today and learning more from a change enthusiast on what that means, what a change enthusiast could look like, could not look like, what questions to ask, how to attract them, how to put them off. And I think that's really helpful for our world of recruitment, and also just to celebrate going forward and enable that. So thank you again for your time. We've loved it. Really appreciate your generosity in sharing your expertise and thinking with us.